Welcome to Application, the TYPO3 community podcast.
Hi, my name is Tymoteusz Motylewski, and this is Application, the TYPO3 community podcast, sharing your stories, your projects, and the difference you make. Celebrate the TYPO3 community on the Application, the TYPO3 podcast. Meet the humans behind the technology.
1, 2. Welcome to Application, the TYPO3 community podcast. I'm Jeffrey A. McGuire. You can call me Jam. And this is where we celebrate the TYPO3 community, sharing your stories, talking about your projects and the difference you make in, around, and with TYPO3 CMS. In today's episode of Application, the TYPO3 community podcast, I had the enormous pleasure to get a couple hours of Tymek's time. Tymoteusz Motylewski. He is the CTO of Macopedia, a software agency in Poland, and has been in the TYPO3 community since the early 2000s, has done a ton of contribution. He was on the core team for a long time, and he's yet another wonderful, generous, kind-hearted, fun person in this community. He and I talk about how he got into TYPO3, the empowerment story of how an open technology like ours let him have a whole career and build a company that employs a significant number of people and helps a lot of clients. And there's an interesting twist there where his agency, having an e-commerce specialty, has allowed more companies to keep more people employed during the pandemic, which I think is a wonderful angle. We talk about open source in the world and in Africa, and there's so much gold in here. I'm glad that you're listening, and I hope you get as much out of this conversation with Tymek as I did speaking with him. Tymoteusz Motylewski, welcome to Application, the TYPO3 community podcast. I'm really, really happy to talk with you. And like so many community friends and colleagues, I have enjoyed spending time with you in the past, and I haven't seen you with my own eyeballs for 2-3 years at this point, which is, you know, I've gotten over feeling guilty about that because we've all been sort of stuck in this pandemic. We're recording this in real time in late November 2021. How have the last couple of years been for you?
Very intensive, I would say, on all grounds. Yeah, from the personal ground, I have 3 kids now, so it was
Congratulations.
Quite an experience to become a father and handle all the unexpected situations. So the only thing you can expect is unexpected, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, on a business side and then community side, you see how the whole ecosystem is evolving and changing rapidly. And so both on the technology side and also my company has grew 2 times during the last few years. So
wow, it's doubled in size.
Yeah.
Why don't you give me your perspective on being an agency in the last couple of years? I saw several patterns over beginning, middle, now in the pandemic with different kinds of agencies. And then let's talk about what's been going on in the TYPO3 community at the same time. Tell us about Macopedia and tell us about how the last couple of years been for Macopedia.
Macopedia is a software house, so development agency located in Poznań, in Poland. This is our headquarters. However, we have a second office in Krakow. We hire people all around Poland. We cannot say, that there is a really main city anymore. We got our 80 people now, and we do several technologies. TYPO3 is one of them, not the only. We also do e-commerce with Shopper, for example, the PIM systems with Akineo, nice. and also the ERP systems with Odoo. So this is a Python-based stack.
All right. And how have the last couple of years been?
Well, very intensive. We have doubled in size. We have, and because of that, we also have to introduce a structure in the company because before we were really flat, and now we have a structure of technological leaders which are handling. Each leader has a technology and engineers in his team. This worked pretty well. We went with this, management 3.0 path and style.
Oh,
Yeah, in the pandemic meant for us that we are changing, and this was a very good move because we started this transition like let's say at least half a year before pandemic started, and we were announcing the leaders after all the preparations. I believe in February
oh,
last year, so it was just before the pandemic started, and
very good
and, and
timing.
it was really super cool because the next months, which were really crazy, I think that not only for us but for the whole world, let's say not
Yeah,
only IT, right?
yeah, yeah.
Without leaders, it will be super hard for me and my business partner. And with our leaders, with their dedication and really we're able to take care of our people with this new times, which requires a constant change.
Yeah.
Changing the way we work, going 100% to remote.
Mhm.
Also, some fluctuations with the customers because for some customers the pandemic means okay, we sell much more, and for some customers it was, oh my god, we cannot sell in any of our physical location
Yeah,
because of the lockdown.
yeah.
And suddenly this the sales channel, e-commerce sales channel, which were something a little addition to the main business, suddenly become the channel which drives 100% of the sales,
Aha.
which also gives us a thought that, well, we are somehow responsible for those people at the end, that if we screw our job, this company will not survive, and the people down in the warehouses, in the production, will lose their job. I see that this is something, some of the missed point. A lot of people life depends on the IT, depends on the e-commerce, depends on the CMS, depends on what we do.
I imagine that Macopedia must be a pretty great place to work if the leadership is really thinking about those sorts of consequences and people up and down the chain. So, did you did you reach out to clients and proactively say, "Hey, really, really e-commerce now, and we can help you"?
Well, usually we do that as a let's say part of the customer success conversation. However, with the pandemic, we had to do that more actively, and well, companies were of course not prepared often, and with bigger corporations, the first reaction to the pandemic and to the lockdown was like, let's cut all the budgets,
Yes.
right? Let's cut
Yep.
everything and then figure out what is essential for us.
Yep.
It was pretty crazy. Hopefully, we were having a long-term relationships with companies, and we were not directly under the marketing budgets, which were cut
Mm.
as a first thing.
Mm.
Yeah, also stuff like contracts with longer period of cancellation helped us a lot to strive. At the end, there was a lot of calls and chaos, but at the end it worked pretty. The first months of pandemic worked pretty well for us, and we also did a bold move to start hiring then and
Mm.
more aggressively, because we saw that many companies around are they're reducing staff or reducing the payment. We went the opposite direction, and yeah, this helped us to acquire some really really cool talents.
Nice. As a leader, as a manager, you also know very well the if you sell better, then suddenly you've got stress on the people and the getting the work done side. And if you don't sell enough, then suddenly you've got stress paying the bills and keeping everybody busy, right? And it's a constant balance and a constant bet about what direction things are going to go. I saw different sorts of agencies and service providers and us when things got really really tough in March and April. We lost a couple of things that were ready for signature. The potential client just pulled away, and other people sort of took a big break. And then looking around the TYPO3 sphere and there's generally the agency space, of course, agencies who were really invested in air transport, hotels, tourism had a really tough time, and agencies that do e-commerce and actually like catalogs and other sort of data organizational systems bumped and then just have been doing better and better and better. You're not the only agency owner to tell me, well, I don't know if you had your best year last year, but I know couple agencies who had their best year last year once everyone figured out that not spending money was also not an option, right? Then everybody got on with digital transformation. And the new term I've heard is digital acceleration. That's happening now too. So whatever turning up digital to 11 means. So turn to the TYPO3 community. I'm going to say I think that the community feels very solid and very collaborative. And because the community is spread all around the world, and because, the community's been around a long time, I have seen a lot of things work quite well. The concept of events and whether the online events are working or not, there are question marks, but I think in general, people have collaborated really well. The contribution is continuing. Version 11 came out and it's pretty great so far. Lots of really good things have happened. And I've run or organized or been in all of these different online events and, sprints and whatever. But I feel that everybody is getting tired of just seeing each other through the camera, I don't know. How does the community feel to you right now and over the last year or two?
Well, I feel a really big need for seeing people in person and collaborate in hand to hand, desk to desk. Yeah, it was pretty tiring. For example, we organized 2 code sprints, one for the TYPO3 Headless and one for the core team, and those were online events. Well, our people, gathered in Poznan together to collaborate, cover, other people around the world were joining remotely. I saw that it's much harder to do this kind of code sprint hackathon as an online event. It's much harder for organizers, but also the collaboration you have to put so much effort to make this collaboration happen that it's quite tiring. And
yeah.
And before, it was usually the code sprint last like 3 days, 4 days, and people were just very enthusiastic and came back to home, feeding the spirit. And now, after 2 days of remote sprinting, it was okay. I feel we managed to do everything, but this human interaction is really a missing key.
Yeah. There's not that buzz, right?
Yeah.
And even if you went for 4 days to wherever to do it together and you got 8 hours of sleep in 4 days, I've had the experience of coming out of it excited and believing in stuff and with fresh ideas and motivations and whatever. And so that having a beer together and whatever, the energy in the room factor is close to impossible to reproduce. I think for open strategy partners, we had to learn very quickly to do all of our client workshops, all of the discovery phase and strategic planning and stuff virtually. And I think we've got an extremely good practice with Miro boards now. But I think in my ideal world now that there would be as many people as possible together. I feel confident that we can have someone call in virtually and be an equal part of the event. But I'm sort of starting to dream of having the room again and like being able to feel when we're tired and need a break or any of that stuff. So I was in a team lead meeting the other day for the community, and some people are reporting fatigue. And I think we all need a recharge, like a big community pizza party or something, but together anyway. Tim Mech, how did you discover TYPO3?
It was a pretty simple story. So back in the day, I was working and delivering to customers, my own CMS, because back then everybody wrote their own CMSs, of course.
Wait, I'm adding you to my list because as crazy as that sounds today, what year was that?
2008, 9, something like that.
Oh, that's a little bit late. But everybody between 2000 and 2005, I mean, I must know a dozen people who had their own CMSs. Yeah. And then, 5 or 10 years ago at conferences, it was hilarious and really, really fun, like 2012, 2015, to ask that question. And there would always be hands up in the audience. Yeah, I had my own, right? And then you'd say, and how many of you still have clients on that? Right? And you're at like a major conference for a major technology, and they're like, so you had your own CMS.
Yeah,
then what happened?
And then one of the customers said, well, I heard from my German partners, that there is this kind of CMS which is called TYPO3, and I would like that. And for me, it was typo what? So I started googling, right, and have found it and say, well, why not, right? Let's try it out. And this was,
Did they say why they wanted it?
they said that this is a number one rising star in dark market, so they wanted.
So you went and checked it out.
Yeah, I tried to learn it and to implement that for the customer. At the end, it worked out. However, from the business perspective, it was completely disaster because, I did not know, without knowing technology, I did not know how to estimate that, right?
Sure.
It was a time I was still, studying, so the amount of money were not that important for me, rather the learning. So it was basically a side job to the studies. Yeah, but then I started looking at it, and I saw a very big benefits and leverages you can have using the system, and I just wanted, I need to know that. There were a lot of people who helped me in that process, because in Poland the community was not very big, but that there were few people who helped you with every question you had on the forum. Who remembers forum now?
So who was helping you?
Christian Szymukowicz. He's the founder of Source Brokers
Okay.
company. He's still doing TYPO3. Yeah, he was answering all those kind of stupid questions. When I now look back and I see what kind of questions were those, okay, those were really silly questions.
It was
But
a different internet, though. The web was very different. So
that's true. That's true. But still, I'm really grateful to him and everybody else who I met and who helped me. And I think that this was also something very, very strong, and is still very strong in type of community. That this community is different than other products.
in English, we have the concept of paying your dues. The first project you did and you were getting money for it, but you probably couldn't. It probably was not in any way justified by the number of hours that you actually
Yeah,
took, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, the funny thing is that in German, okay, and we'll translate this to English later, but in German, they call paying your dues. They say learning by doing. So you were studying, you did this project in TYPO3, you had your own, was your CMS in PHP as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what happened then? What you were studying and you did this thing, then what happened?
Well, I started getting more into it and started implementing TYPO3 instead of the custom built CMS.
Okay. Was that called TIMEC3?
To be honest, I don't know if it had a name at all.
Kashankaware.
Kashankor. That's good. Let's call it the next product app. Then I went to finish my studies in Germany, in Stuttgart, and I stayed in Germany for a few years. Yeah, working in TYPO3.
Stuttgart's got a lot of TYPO3 going on.
Well, I actually moved to by Frankfurt to Wiesbaden and worked by AOE.
Yeah, AOE's, yep, huge,
And
great. Key and Gould, all those people, yeah.
yeah. So it was this path, and I remember that my interview was pretty nice and easy. I was expecting much harder, and because I was already contributing to the type of free community, not to the core yet, but I published some extensions and I contribute to the documentation and stuff like that. And I was really surprised that they did not have that much question about the competencies. They just, I just showed what I wrote, what are the modules I did, what are the contributions, and it was pretty nice.
Before 2010, I think that the world was still based on resumes and job interviews and that sort of old way of trying to figure out who to hire. And it sounds like you had a very early experience of what's quite common now, especially in open source, where a lot of times clients ask as well. I think you might be able to back me up, but if you need to, if you want to do something, you could say, well, here's my GitHub account, and here are my extensions in the extension repository. That's your resume, because it shows that 10,000 sites are using this and 100,000 sites are using that, and you contributed to core there. And it doesn't necessarily matter where you were sitting and working doing that if I'm going to hire you for a technical job.
Yeah.
In my experience, maybe a decade ago, the clients in open source also figured out how to judge agencies by their community engagement. So we had people saying, okay, if you say you could do a media project for us, show me your team's handles in the repository and show me that you're maintaining or writing code in this space to prove your credibility, which was like a huge wake-up call for contribution at that point. Do clients look at that open source side of stuff nowadays?
No, I don't. Well, not our customers, not at least not in Poland.
Yeah.
So if we show them that, they can value. Most of them, see and grasp the value and the proof of work. However, most of the customers often don't grasp the concept of open source.
Yes.
And that the companies are really contributing stuff, and you can show that, you can see that. So it's not really useful in a to get customers to us by showing contributions. It's for us, it's more giving back, right? If we are using the software which is for free, we are not paying a license fees. We can adapt it, and we can install it, use it for our customers. Then I see it as a rudimentary fairness to give something back. And often it doesn't have to be something big, right?
Yeah.
It can be a good issue with steps to reproduce. It can be something to documentation. It can be a patch, right?
Yeah.
Different, or even financial. Just send a few bucks.
Sponsor an event.
Yeah.
Hire an intern. There's so many ways to contribute, and I think that a sensible business that bases its critical, revenue stream or critical infrastructure on an open source technology, or anything where you have any kind of influence on it, I think you'd be crazy not to be in the middle of it, to make sure it's okay, and to make sure that it has a future, and to make sure that it's the best quality possible, because an agency sale is often a trust sale, right?
Yeah.
You have customers who are really good at making refrigerators or running a hotel, and you can't demand that they then open source understand our weird intellectual world of open source and giving away good ideas. And they just want to trust that you can build good things and that they're going to run for 10 years. So I guess for us, the way that we assure it's going to run for 10 years is that we make sure that TYPO3 is healthy, right?
That's right.
So,
well, then the story to closing the TYPO3 story, because it was not the end. Then I started really digging into contributing more, and finally I managed to get to the core team, and I was in the core team for several years. Now I'm not in the core team anymore, but in the product team, so more strategy related topics. But my history shows that it's really possible to start from zero, from a student who just doesn't know the name of the system, to become a part of the team which decides what goes in or not. What does quality means, right? What's the correct way to solve the issue?
That's a really beautiful thing that you're describing, and your path from being able to program at some level, and somebody asks you to check this thing out because they want it that way, and the open source enablement story. I'm just sort of seeing that from a slightly different perspective. I don't think that commercial things where you have to buy licenses and buy manuals and buy user seats and all that stuff give people the chance to define their own lives in the same way, and define and have control of their economic destiny and support their families and communities. And then you also took that opportunity. You support 80 other families paying their rent and surviving, and however many customers and their customers and the people in the warehouses, right? And all of that came because this technology is open and anybody can start at the same place and every time we make it better, it's better. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
Sometimes we are going to the academic events like, career days. On those events, from the stage, I always get questions like, what is the best way to path your career in open source, in IT, in programming? What can I do as a student to progress? And my answer is always, one TV series less. And just use this time, this 40 minutes, to do something for free, do some open source contribution.
Right. And then what do you say to them when they say, "Oh, I couldn't contribute. I don't know." What do you tell them about that contribution?
Well, that my grandma can contribute. It's so easy, right? I mean, it's testing the documentation. What can be easiest thing to do, and just marking what failed, right? Where did you find yourself confused? That's a really simplest contribution you can make.
Downloading the software and asking good questions is
Yeah,
already helping. Yeah.
but of course, for engineers, it's just a beginning, just to get something out of the fence, just to feel the feeling also of the gratitude, and that very quickly you will become recognizable in the community. People start knowing your name, not yet the face, but knowing your name. And yeah, it's a really great path forward, because in the open source world you can do stuff the best way. Every company has their good enough threshold, right?
Right. Uh-huh. Yep.
This is good enough, let's move forward. And in open source you will get this another expert who will take a look and say, well, yeah, your 300 lines of code, yeah, it's good job, it solves the issue, but if you solve the problem in a different place, it will be those 3 lines, that's it.
Yeah. And you take this external library and this check function, and you're good to go. And then you're not recreating the wheel or whatever.
Yeah, so and you are getting coaching from the best people in the world from this technology. You will never be able to hire.
Yeah, so I have had the opportunity many times over the years to talk with quote unquote bosses about, well, why should we be contributing? Because I don't know, we have so much client work, we can't, we don't have time to do the patches or send people to stupid conferences or whatever. And I'm like, tell me what it costs to send an engineer to do
Yeah.
some course somewhere for a week or a month, or pay for their whatever at night school. Compare that to sending them to a conference where they're going to come back super excited and grateful to you that they got to hang out with their peers and the best people in their industry for a week. Plus, they go to code sprints with literally the best people in this particular technology whom you'll never be able to hire, as you said, right? And get training with the best. And like submitting code into the open source resources for many projects is like, it's the toughest coding standards, the highest quality standards, plus smart people who care about the thing, right? Looking to make sure that every idea that we're trying to throw in there actually makes sense, right? So it's like the most affordable, cost efficient kind of training and retention and motivation for developers possible.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. My first code sprint was actually, well, back then the TYPO3 had only code sprints for the core team. People outside were not involved. However, well, I desperately wanted to see how it's going. How to do this stuff, how the internals works, what kind of people are there, right? So I wrote an email to a guy who organized a X-based code sprint somewhere in North Germany. And I wrote a letter, I'm not a core developer. I have not contributed to the core yet. I did some extensions, but not to the core. However, I would really love to go to the code sprint. I can brew coffee. I can, write tests. I can do whatever you want me to do, but just please take me. Yeah, to my surprise, the answer came, well, we have a coffee machine, so this is covered. However, tests, yes, please.
Nice.
Yeah, just came.
And then you got to learn and contribute and make a difference, and everybody was better for it, right?
Yeah. This was a really great experience to see that those people I know only from the name, like they are super, top experts. Those are also at the same time really real humans, humble people who are friendly, open, and who can sit by you and ask you, a freshman, like, hey, what do you think about this code, right?
Yeah.
And I was, well, looks good.
Open source is a great equalizer as well. I believe that literally everybody who comes to a community has a unique set of experiences and perspectives, and therefore can provide unique value to the project. When I got into open source, it was literally only technical and literally only code and literally only developers. I don't know now, but even in the last few years, there are still a few conferences around who like only code and only no soft talks and I never did hard technical talks, and I'm not sure I've ever had code in one of my talks after the first couple of years on the scene. But now I think it's great that communities understand that we're a groups of humans and we need lawyers and designers and we do need someone to whatever their contribution is. I love it when people bring their families, and the partners or kids are volunteering as well and then learning on one side and making sandwiches on the other, and all of that helps it be better. So that's
Yeah, and learn to how to communicate better, right?
yeah.
I mean, my job as a CTO is mostly working with people, not with the code,
Right.
these days, and this is a challenging thing to learn, right?
Nice. But that you can see that, right? My entire technology career, once I figured out what I think I'm here for, is I care about the humans behind the technology. And I'm most interested if I'm talking with someone about a specific something that they built. One of my questions is always going to be, what was going on in your life at that time? Right? Which leads to when was that is a really powerful question, because as soon as they say when was that, they're like, well, I was finishing university and doing this and this and my first kid and then da, 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 da. And you have this real context around, and that's why I couldn't spend 6 hours on deployments anymore, and so I built automation, and it's like, wow, I love those moments. What is the coolest thing you've ever built with TYPO3?
That's a hard question, but I would just take first one, which just popped in my mind. This is a gamification portal. We have a customer which is we are handling since many years, and this customer issues sports cards. So you buy just one card, and then you can go with these cards to any gym, swimming pool, whatever. And they have over million users in Poland, so it's pretty big number.
Wait, so it's a membership card, and then you can
Yeah.
go to X number of things a week or a month or whatever?
Yeah, any gym, any swimming pool, sauna, squash place,
Nice.
tennis.
There's one of those in Germany. I don't know if we're allowed to say the brand because it might be the different brand.
However, they had this idea to do some additional value for the customers, also especially during summer. So the idea was to build a gamification portal and a summer game. So during summer, you do different activities. You go to the gym, you get points. You drive with the city bicycle, you get points. You watch some webinar about healthy food or sports, how to train. You get points, and then they got some awards. You can exchange the points to awards, and the whole thing was running on TYPO3 for several years. This was pretty amazing and tool application actually, and it was running like huge amount of users.
Well, you said there are a million users in Poland?
Yeah, of the cards. Yeah.
Wow. That is okay. That's pretty cool. And that's one we haven't had yet. Excellent. Who do you look for advice or information in the TYPO3 community?
Well, there are plenty of people whose opinion I value a lot, and or I'm grateful for an advice. It would be really hard to say.
Okay. Now it's on Slack instead of in a forum, but there are lots of people who are really, really helpful and really, really willing to push you in the right direction and help you learn stuff. And I haven't seen people sort of with the old fashioned open source attitude of like RTFM and go away. And that's a dumb question. I don't see that in Slack, in TYPO3 Slack, except when I put into the random channel or the whatever the The non-tech chat channel is a couple of years ago that my apartment was that my daughter was looking for an apartment in Rotterdam. I put at channel. Um, I got 5,000 burns back. But hey, I learned. So there's some value in that
Yeah,
in that mistake.
but this is really important thing. I mean that to always think about who will read this communication. We also had to learn that in a company when we grew. I mean that if you send a message to the to the channel or to the email to the whole company, then you suddenly are hitting tens of people.
Yes.
So if you write something which is unclear or without explaining context or next steps or what will happen, then you will get tens of people asking you questions,
Yeah.
and you don't want that.
And not only are they asking you questions, but they might not even have needed to use their time or brains to deal with that problem because it's not theirs, right? Yeah. I was in a startup. I was the 18th employee, and I remember very, very distinctly very specific growth points. Somehow 18 to 30 was sort of one feeling. And then between 40 and 50 was when all of the communications changed. Like up to about 30 or 40, every message was always to everybody, and everybody could jump in on every project and do whatever work made sense. But then by the time we got over 50, we were starting to have actual products and an actual way to make money. So that started changing. And I remember the day that I didn't know everybody or everybody's name at the company. And that was at about 45, 50-ish.
Yeah.
And then I remember when somebody got in touch with me inside the company and I didn't know that their job title existed and what their job title meant. And that was somewhere around 150. And that was like,
and,
happy
and,
to
and
help you, Dave, but what is it that you do?
but he didn't ask you to pay money to Congo, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so anyway, so
my experience was pretty similar. When we grew, we also had to change the communication. I know everybody in the company by name and by face. Because I'm also in the hiring process and I'm on the top, so I have to.
right.
However, a few months ago, we did a real life company meeting gathering in some nice place. Many people, often from the same team, have not seen each other, in real life because they were hired during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and there was just no possibility to do so.
Yeah.
And it was very, very important to get them together and to, okay, so this is my team. I mean, not just the avatars,
Yeah.
not just the video cameras face, but real people. Oh, you are so tall.
Everything that I say about open source community and the dynamic and the energy and the motivation coming from meeting together, right? That drives really great remote communication and collaboration. And all of that counts exactly for your remote teams. I want to say that Open Strategy Partners, where I work, has a really good culture,
Not bragging.
and it's a pleasure to get to work. But the current constellation of people, we've never ever had the chance to come together physically, because of the last couple of years. But I imagine that if Macopedia doubles in size again, that you're it's just not going to be physically possible for you to be in every interview and know every single person. I think that would be tough.
We'll see when we get there.
Right? It's a problem you want to have.
That's right.
Exactly. What is something in the TYPO3 community that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I already talked about that. I mean, this openness and
Mm.
being really friendly, and that the community is not focused on the money, and that you do not see every community member as a potential customer or hire,
Mm.
but you see them as people from in the same, in the same group, rowing the same boat or whatever.
Mm. That's another nice bit of perspective. Everyone might be competing for a given project or needing new developers, but we're all still kind of in the same community together, not sort of against each other. I like that.
Yeah, and you asked about advice I got, or who do I value. So I remember, for example, that the topic of management 3.0. This was the idea I got from Olivier Doberkau on some of the conferences. We just talk about structure and growing a company. And for example, this was an idea he just shared, right? And in theory, we are two agencies which are doing the same product. So, well, we should be competing, right? And the same with other people. With Benny Mark, he's also leading a company, but he was always helpful and well, he's driving the product, right?
Yeah, I see Benny is very able to put on the running my agency hat and running the TYPO3 core development hat. And as far as I can tell, he does a excellent job at both, and it's very ethical and very fair. I really like that a lot. I admire that a lot in him.
That's true. That's true.
Can you tell me about a time that the community helped you?
Except for the first product, first implementation. I see the community is helping me or my team because, well, I'm not doing development anymore on a daily basis. Let's say every day, right? So every day we use documentation. Every day we use product deployments, issues or patches somebody created. Every day we have some discussions, or sometimes we collaborate on some, common goal or common product, common extension. I remember, tens of situations. Like I go to the Slack, I have issue with XYZ, and I ask question and I got answer from maintainer of this extension, for example, in some minutes.
It's a really perfect answer. That's just a fantastic, perfect answer. Thank you. It's great. Here's a ready, fire, aim round. Quick questions, okay?
Yeah.
What one word would you use to describe TYPO3? Powerful. What is your favorite feature of TYPO3?
Page 3.
What feature would you like to see removed from TYPO3?
I believe it has too less features than too much.
Okay. What feature would you like to see added to TYPO3?
I would like to see maybe not added because it's already there, but really highlighted. It's the link validator. It's like a hidden gem in TYPO3, especially for all this SEO people, that TYPO3 can detect all the broken links and just report it to you, so you can just click and go directly to the place which needs to be fixed. And the problem is that it's a little bit hidden in an info module, and it really deserves to be a separate module which is visible for everybody, and you can just go there and get your feedback.
That's another hidden superpower. And in a TYPO3 installation, something that really impressed me when I figured it out is all of the recent versions have full upgrade documentation built into them, and you can upgrade from version to version to version. And also internally, you've got some code analysis. If you've written custom code, that'll tell you how compatible it is with moving that forward as well, plus the full documentation on board. And I was just like, wow.
And that's not everything. Do you know the project from Sebastian Schreiber? He has implemented the Rector TYPO3 Rector project, which is able to actually migrate your code. So it has rules for every backwards incompatible change in TYPO3.
Wow. Okay.
You rewrite your code. You just run it, and suddenly your extension becomes, compatible with the next version.
You see, everyone who hates regex, now you see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow. I think we should do a session about just like mind-blowing tiny things that you might not have realized about TYPO3. That's so cool. I don't know if this is the same question in a different color, but tell us something that you wish people would know about TYPO3, but they don't usually.
From the customer's perspective, that it's a very good. That TYPO3 has a very good return of invest. Well, also because of the upgrade path, we just mentioned, and the strategy TYPO3 has, that it's evolutionary, not revolutionary. Well, from the developers or integrators perspective, is how to structure the content and the editor experience more in line, so you can reuse the thing, over the place, and reuse the components, reuse the elements.
You've been thinking about that a lot, working on the headless stuff too,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So I would say those are the things.
Yeah, and on the return in investment topic, if any of you are working in, a place where GDPR or its equivalent laws are in force, we have to run quote unquote supported software, and TYPO3 is fully supported for 3 years because of the community structure and the official maintenance. And every major version, every long-term support version of the major versions is supported by the community for actively for 18 months, passively, which means security and important backports, for another 18 months. So you get 3 years of official support, which means you're legally compliant. And then you can buy from the TYPO3 company, the TYPO3 GmbH, you can buy another 3 years of support. So you can actually get 6 years of legal compliance from a piece of open source software, which is awesome. And
This is really amazing,
yeah,
you will not see that in any other products. Like
yeah,
many products, even commercial ones, that doesn't guarantee that, or even don't have the roadmap how long this software will be
yeah,
supported. So
yeah.
you even don't know when you make a decision.
Right. I mean, you can just plan your upgrades every 5 years, and I mean that's a huge time scale for most websites anyway. And frankly, we might as well say it while we're here. Since version 9 or 10, the GDPR compatibility and the ability to delete people and forget about their records officially and verifiably has been built into. So I have seen several members of the TYPO3 community and the TYPO3 association officially working very hard to make the open source technology that we love and use to make an even bigger difference in the world and to be even more of an equalizer. Just like your story of you built a career and you're supporting all these lives, right? From because you had access to this thing. Matthias Bolt-Lesniak talks about TYPO3 being a true democracy and a power for political and societal change in the world, which is pretty amazing. And you are one of those people that I think is doing a lot to make the world a better place with open source software. And I love that TYPO3 in particular has been involved in the CMS Africa event
Yeah.
for a few years, and that someone along the way discovered that the government of Rwanda, for example, had a bunch of old TYPO3 sites. Since then, with some volunteering and some association support, they've been upgraded. We're training people down there. There's mentoring going on. Please tell me your Rwanda story.
And with the Rwanda, so actually the whole adventure started with Daniel from Rwandan, who came to me and say, well, the Rwandan government in Africa has a bunch of TYPO3 websites, and they are trying to upgrade TYPO3 and make a new platform which will be reused over, because every website there was built with a separate instance, with the separate design, and you can imagine if you have hundreds of websites, it is really hard to maintain.
Yeah.
And the idea was to create some common ground, some templates to organize the thing, share the data between websites, and do what CMSs are good for, right? And Daniel told me that there's this project we can do together in Rwanda. Well, at first I had to check on the map where Rwanda is, because I know that the country and a little bit of the history, but where exactly is this? Yeah, we started this mentorship and consultancy project with 10 people on the ground. We started with online coaching sessions, with helping them, run the website, create the website first from scratch without doing work ourselves. So this was one of the strong points in the whole project, that we are there to help them to build competencies, but we are not allowed to do anything ourselves.
So the learning by doing principle, actually.
That's right. That's right. This was also why I loved the project from the beginning, because it was very clear for me that this is how you should work, how you should help, not by just giving a fish, but a stick, right? Yeah, we started online, and then we went to Rwanda a few times and worked, for a week or two with the people on the ground. And after a few months, it went live. So the official Rwanda government website, as well as many ministries and institutions, are running on TYPO3 the new version, and this whole thing is maintained and hosted and developed by the local people there.
Yeah. So these agencies have these skills and the ability to offer services and in their own economy go on and help more people learn to do it and generate more
Yeah,
value. That's
yeah.
fantastic.
So in this group of webmasters or developers, we got both people from the public administration, from the, let's say, Ministry of IT, as well as the local vendor. So they were working as one team to deliver the thing.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So I know that Anya Lexenring went down there. You've been down there. Daniel's been down there. Who else has gone down?
Well, for the CMS Africa, there were I believe Mates was also there, and a few other, Oliver the Burkau, I believe. For the Rwanda, I'm not sure if anybody else went there.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. In the meantime, didn't it come out that some other governments in Africa are really interested in this as well?
That's true. That's true. So there are signals from other governments and other institutions. And well, while being there, we also discovered that there are other institutions we did not know which are running TYPO3, like one of the banks there or university. Well, and then we did not have them on the list, and they were not part of the relaunch project. So there is much more going on in TYPO3 or than we thought at the beginning.
Yeah, so it's so interesting that also setting a technology free, making it available to anyone, then it goes and grows like a mushroom in the wild as well. It's
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
it's pretty fascinating. It definitely goes to all the empowerment stories. That's terrific. Timek, you mentioned holding a TYPO3 headless sprint at your company. Headless is considered quite important as part of the web today and the ability to deliver data or business logic to applications and different sorts of front ends. And one thing that I've always found quite exciting or interesting about TYPO3 is that since it was built, it has always been a backend system and a front end system that communicates via APIs and has a scripting layer in between, right? Where so there's interesting power and security kind of built in since forever. But tell me what's going on with Headless and TYPO3 now, and tell me what that sprint was about.
Well, a few years ago, when we saw the headless movement being something really important, we started investigating. How can we use TYPO3 to deliver the content in a headless way, and also in some standardized way, because many companies in the wild, us included, for certain projects delivered dedicated APIs. Yeah, we integrate for this customer. We integrate TYPO3 with e-commerce, so we do a little API. We do what we need, and that's it. So we were starting investigating how to do that in a more standardized way. So TYPO3 to have a really headless API in TYPO3, which is not limited to some small amount of features, but which expose all the features TYPO3 is known of. So language handling, translation.
A universal API to cover all of those internal APIs.
Yeah, so you can have the same result as with the standard templating. If you have this language fallback in the standard templating, you want to have the same in a headless approach. If you want to have this, multi-tenant, multi-domain setup, we want to have the same in headless. And we started building that, as you said, using the layer of which was already in TYPO3, that the front-end rendering is separated from the data and backend. We use it to deliver a JSON API for TYPO3, which allows you to use workspaces, language handling, whatever you like.
Wow.
And
Nice.
in TYPO3.
How long has that been going?
Well, it's already, I believe it's 3 years since we, 3 or 3 years since we started the first project. It was one of the first project was Macmillan Education, Macmillan English website, one of the biggest publishers in UK. And since then, most of the projects we do in TYPO3 are on headless. We have also released
You as Macopedia.
as Macopedia, yeah. We also have released as open source the JavaScript part, the front-end rendering part. So you can use headless as standalone. You just integrate TYPO3 with whatever you like using this API. But you can also have a full stack PWA application where front-end is template and is rendered in JavaScript. And this JavaScript library is communicating with TYPO3 headless backend.
Progressive Web App, PWA.
Yep.
Nice. And do you know how many other agencies are using this the headless setup?
Well, I know of more than 10. However, judging from the statistics on a GitHub and in PackageBiz, we got tens or even hundreds installation per day. So it's pretty much bigger than we know.
Okay, so that also proves that headless and decoupled systems have really arrived, that it's a fundamentally important part of digital business models now.
Well, the shorter answer is yes. However, you have to use the right tool, right? So not every customer, the headless and PWA is not good for every customer, but you have to judge and use the right tool for the job.
So what I think I just heard, I would have told anyone who asked me, one really good reason to use TYPO3 is, your favorite feature, the page tree, allows me to do all sorts of hierarchical data modeling, including a really strong multi-domain setup. And because there's really strong multilingual handling, that means that TYPO3 is incredibly good for setting up international, multinational businesses or places where you have subsidiaries or whatever.
That's right.
And user rights and branding and all of that can be centralized, can be distributed. It's great for all of that. And I would have said that anyway. Now I think what I heard is that I could take that same setup and output it through the headless API so that each region or country or language could have its own app or its own, e-commerce things going and still be running that from one place. And I'm even more excited.
But what is even more, you can have some of the domains, some of the tenants running the standard rendering with templates in Fluid, and some of them going headless. The same installation. So you don't have to rebuild everything from scratch, but you can migrate or use whatever is the best for the job.
Right, and I'm guessing that you can also take something that's standard rendered as a website and turn it on for headless later without having to do any more crazy amounts of work either.
You will not have to do any content changes. You just reuse the content as is.
Right, because structured data, nice, which is one of my favorite things about TYPO3. So, but that is yet another conversation, and we have another thing that we like to call the Suggest a Guest, and Carl and I are planning season 3 of this little show. Who is it that you'd like to hear us talk with?
Yeah, I think if I can call just one person, I would say it should be Sebastian Schreiber, with
the Rector.
Yeah, with the Rector. Well, the whole Rector project, which is much bigger than just the TYPO3, because he wrote just the TYPO3 plugin, and the Rector is a tool in general for PHP world, and it's the tool is really changing the PHP landscape because it becomes much cheaper to upgrade to be compatible with newer PHP versions.
Yeah,
and also to migrate frameworks or breaking compatibility changes. And the plugin Sebastian wrote for TYPO3 is if not the biggest and the well maintained, then one of the biggest plugins for Rector. No other CMS, no other application this size as TYPO3 has a tool like that.
Okay. I'd love to talk with him. And it seems to me like There might also be a fun idea. What would you think if we did some conversations with essential technologies outside of TYPO3, like things that we need and rely on that aren't TYPO3? So the Rector people would be cool. Composer, I know Jordi and Niels, that would be fun. Maybe PHP Fig in there somehow.
That would be really cool. If you are about to talk to the composer people, I would like you to verify one anecdote, if I may.
The Composer Challenge.
Yeah, the composer challenge. So I heard from somebody, I don't remember now from whom, that the composer JSON, that the package manifest, was actually inspired by the TYPO3 extensions manifest, this mconf.php file. And they took this idea from TYPO3, because TYPO3 had this package management, from years before
Right.
the
It was very early.
composer came. So I would like to validate this.
Okay, that's a really fun question. And years past, I saw Jordi Bojano quite regularly, and I would consider him a friend. So Jordi and Niels, we're coming for you for this podcast too. It's a fantastic idea. Tymik, it's been really, really great to talk with you. And I think that my hope is that the next time we talk, or sometime soon when we talk, that we could actually do it over beers and good food and stuff. And
Poznan croissants.
I'm really interested about Poznan croissants now. Yes, and the fact that I can make them myself there, that is perfect. That's the kind of experience that's worth traveling for, I think. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. Thank you so much for your contributions.
Thank you.
It's been great. It's been great.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks to the TYPO3 Association for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you B13 and Stephanie Kreutzer for our logo. Merci beaucoup Patrick Gaumont, TYPO3 developer and musician extraordinaire, for our theme music. Thanks again to today's guest. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe in the podcast app of your choice and share Application, the TYPO3 community podcast, with your friends and colleagues. If you didn't like it, please share it with your enemies. Would you like to play along and suggest a guest for the podcast? Do you have questions or comments? Reach out to us on Twitter at TYPO3Podcast. You can find show notes, links, and more information in our posts on typo3.org. Remember, open source software would not be what it is without you. Thank you all for your contributions. And do you have a Polish tongue twister for us?
Oh, of course. A lot of. For example, w Szczebrzeszynie chrząszcz brzmi w trzcinie.
I'll make that my ringtone. What does it mean? And do we have to cut it out of the podcast?
No. It means that in a city of Szczebrzeszyn, it's a really real city, there is a bug, a special kind of bug, which is chrząszcz, which make a noise by the sea, let's say, by the water.
Nice, fun. I think tongue twisters could be a fun feature for season 3. We'll ask everyone to say a tongue twister in their native language.
And maybe say a tongue twister of the previous guest.